Steelrising is the newest Souls-like game in 2022. This one has a steampunk aesthetic and vibe. You're playing in an alternate history Paris with a lot of robots and action going on here. Hey guys, it's Connor from the Steel Lodge, and I've been playing a bit of Steelrising so far, and I've actually really enjoyed my time with the game. The game's developed by Spiders, who also worked on Greedfall, and they're making Greedfall 2. I've never played those games, but I've heard they're pretty good. A bit of a mixed reception on those ones, and this game actually has a pretty mixed reception too online, but for my time with it so far, I found it to be really enjoyable. I actually like the aesthetic quite a bit here. It's definitely a lot different from a lot of Souls-like, where they just kind of go the route of Dark Souls, where it's dark fantasy. Here it's something completely different, and I appreciate that. Overall, the game's pretty demanding on the Steam Deck, but you can hit 30 FPS quite consistently. 40 FPS is a little bit rough on the game, so we'll dive into the details now. Let's jump right into it.
So it's worth noting that this game currently doesn't have a Steam Deck verification status, and it's also made using Spider's own engine, not something like Unreal Engine 4. The first thing to note about this game is that if you don't set a compatibility version and just launch right into the game, the video is going to be broken for the main screen here, so I'd recommend installing Proton GE, then forcing that through the game's compatibility settings, and then you should be good to go. A tiny issue with the Proton GE version is that there's a tiny green bar at the bottom of the main menu, but I haven't seen this anywhere else, so it's not really a big deal. One other issue I encountered here when playing the game, and I also encountered this in the beta, is that when you launch the game on the Steam Deck, sometimes it'll just hang and not actually load into the game itself. To fix this, I honestly just used the Steam button and the B button to close the game forcibly a few times, and then launched into it, and one time it just succeeded, and after that I didn't have any problems. Steelrising offers a good amount of settings options here, but I just opted to go with the low preset and then tweaked it from there. The one setting I would really recommend turning up for the low option preset though is the texture filtering, otherwise textures are going to look really bad at certain angles. I turned this up to ultra and I didn't really have any performance problems, so play around from normal to ultra and see if anything happens for you. It's definitely going to make the game look a lot better. Now Steelrising actually ships with a number of upscaling techniques here. We have DLSS, which we can't use on the Steam Deck, FSR 1.0, which is nice that it's built into the game because it works better here than using the one that's built into the Steam Deck. And then finally, we also have an option to just upscale using the engine from a different resolution. Now, initially, I was actually interested in seeing how the engine's upscaling technique worked and if it gave us good performance, so I went ahead and dropped the resolution to 70% and tried to hit 40 FPS using that. And unfortunately, this does not give you very stable performance using the low preset and higher texture filtering. Steelrising is an action RPG, so I did want to get the highest frame rate I could possibly attain here. 40 FPS was the target goal here because 60 FPS is really not attainable unless you turn the resolution way down. So I still wanted to use the engine's upscaling here and try to hit 40 FPS, so I dropped the resolution down to about 60%. That did give me more stable performance at 40 FPS, but honestly, in some scenes it just gets out of hand and the frame rate gets very jittery here. Dialing the resolution back to 50% did improve the frame rate consistency generally, but I think there's a bigger problem here right now with this game when using this upscaling technique. Sometimes it looks like the game allocates too much RAM, and that can cause severe stuttering to happen in certain areas. The Steam Deck has 16 gigabytes of pooled memory, and sometimes here I did see us exceeding that, and that would cause extreme stutter. I've seen this happen in games like Final Fantasy VII Remake on the Steam Deck, so hopefully we can get this figured out so this isn't a problem in the future. Now switching over to the FSR 1.0 implementation built into the game and setting it to the performance preset worked pretty good for hitting 40 FPS relatively consistently. When using this upscaling method, I honestly didn't run into any of those problems where I'd get severe frame time spikes in certain areas that would last for a couple seconds, so this worked better overall generally. All that being said though, the frame time is still not super consistent here at 40 FPS. During certain boss fights, or when you're in certain areas, you will drop frames here and there. So bumping our target down from 40 FPS to 30 FPS is something I would suggest most users to do here. Honestly, I still thought the game played pretty well at 30 FPS on the go, and was a fun experience. Now here I'm in another boss fight, low settings with filtering set to ultra and FSR set to performance mode, and if you look at our frame time graph, it's very consistent, and our GPU and CPU are pretty happy here, not being used too much, which is going to give us a lot more battery life on the go. Compared to when we were trying to hit 40 FPS, the battery life is significantly better here now. Now I wanted to experiment a bit more, so I pushed FSR from performance mode to balance mode, and generally I was still hitting 30 FPS quite consistently. There were a bit more frame time spikes, but nothing too bad or noticeable for me on the go, honestly. If you look at our RAM, this might actually be what's causing these stutters when they do occur versus our GPU, which is hanging around 70% usage at the maximum. Now I wanted to push it one step further, so I did raise the FSR quality to quality mode, and overall this was a bit more inconsistent than balanced mode, so I'd recommend just sticking to balanced or performance mode. Here, once again, we're not really hitting the 100% cap on our GPU usage, but the RAM and VRAM usage is a bit higher than those other two modes, so it will have more problems. So in conclusion, my recommended settings are the low preset, and then going to the texture filtering and raising that to high or ultra, and then using the balanced or performance mode for FSR 1.0 that's built into the game. Lock the frame rate down to 30 FPS for a more consistent experience, but you can probably also try 40 FPS if you want a bit more inconsistent experience, but better responsiveness in general. If it was me, I would personally stick to 30 FPS on the go, because the 40 FPS mode does chew up quite a bit more battery here. I'm definitely looking forward to playing more Steelrising. Honestly though, I'm probably going to play this one on my RTX 3090 on my OLED screen to get the best performance and visual quality possible, but I always love to see how new releases play on the Steam Deck, and if I'm ever on the go, I know I can take that game with me. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a bunch of Steam Deck content on here. I actually did a video covering a bunch of Souls-like games on the Steam Deck and how they run, so maybe check that one out. Otherwise, have a good one everybody. Later.